The situation, sadly, has worsened. Starting right now, no one may go outside under any circumstances. Leaving your homes could result in catastrophic damage to you and to the very fabric of the universe. Okay, bye.
I don't know if you saw that clip online recently, but I did, and it made me want to watch The Good Place again. So I did. Which put me in a real if you give a mouse a cookie situation. If you give someone with a philosophy degree a show about ethics, they're going to want to make a YouTube video to go along with it. I should note right here that this video will contain spoilers for the show The Good Place. If you haven't seen it, go do that instead. Here's the thing, I initially bounced off of this show because I saw the first few episodes and I thought, I know what this show is doing. Now, this isn't the usual, oh don't worry, it gets good after episode 50 problem. The show was good from episode 1. I just thought that I knew what it was trying to do. You know, the classic bad person gets into heaven because of an algorithmic miscalculation, but learns to be good by taking ethics classes from their moral philosophy professor soulmate that they just met. Classic stuff. What the show is actually doing, and what I realized after I got over myself enough to actually watch the show, is much more interesting. See, it sets up the ethics lessons as the vehicle through which the characters improve themselves. But if we look primarily at Eleanor and Michael, we can see that it's not a lack of ethical knowledge that's preventing them from being good people. It's not that they don't know how to be good people. It's just that they don't want to be good people. And so what the show does is it sets up these ethics lessons as the way that they're going to get better. But it's actually the relationships that they form through taking these ethics lessons that help them to become better people. It's the relationships that they form that make them want to change, that give them that desire to be better. I've been talking about Eleanor and Michael specifically because I think they're the most interesting case studies. They are the ones who at the beginning are clearly the worst. You can see that in Eleanor's flashbacks and also in the fact that Michael is a literal demon. Told you there would be spoilers. So I want to focus on the changes that both of them undergo in the first 2 seasons, because I think that's where the real original character growth happens that builds the foundation for the rest of the show. So at the start of the show, we learn that Eleanor has died and has gone to the good place. And then we learn pretty soon after that she wasn't really supposed to be here. We see some flashbacks from her life where she was a pretty awful person. And so what she does is she asks her new soulmate, Chidi, who's a professor of moral philosophy, to teach her how to be a good person. Now it's interesting to note that while Chidi does consider whether or not to help her, he never considers whether or not teaching her ethics will actually help her. Like, he seems to be fully convinced that teaching someone ethics makes them a better person, which is, I think, a claim that is disproven in the show. So Eleanor's motivation at the beginning of the show is don't get caught. She's essentially trying to scam her way into staying in the good place. You see this for the first time in episode 2, when there's that flying lesson where everyone has to choose between flying and cleaning up garbage. And Chidi convinces her that she needs to choose cleaning up garbage over flying as a self-sacrificial sort of exercise. And she's really not having it. She ultimately does end up going back and doing the work for real that she had just pretended to do earlier, but she's really primarily motivated by the guilt that she feels and not by Chidi's lessons specifically.
I went to all the places where I dumped trash earlier and cleaned it up so it couldn't be traced back to me.
Well, it looks like you cleaned up everything. You're doing this because you feel bad.
2 big growth moments that we see from Eleanor early on are when she comforts Tahani, even though earlier in the episode she had said that she hated her, and when Chidi expresses frustration over having to teach Eleanor all the time, and she gives him the gift of the fork off Eleanor sign and the boat with French poetry and wine in it, right? Neither of these actions that she performs is really a result of ethical principles that she's learned from Chidi. It's really just a sort of goodness through osmosis. It seems like she's becoming more in tune with her conscience because of the relationships that she's forming. You know, Chidi is more setting a good example of what it means to be a considerate person more than he is teaching her, like, this is how you do it. One of the biggest inflection points comes in episode 9 of season 1, where Eleanor tells Chidi, I don't belong, but I want to. This is a moment where she realizes that she has work she needs to do to improve herself, and also she expresses the desire to actually make that change. And what's really interesting about this moment, when viewed in the context of the show as a whole, is that she's making this decision. I told you there would be spoilers. She's making this decision in the bad place. Everyone around her, other than Chidi, Tahani, and Jason, are trying to make her miserable and keep her being a bad person. And she changes in spite of all of that. So Eleanor definitely learns some more complex ethical systems from Chidi. They have lots of conversations in the show where they're talking about, what would Kant say? But it's made clear through conversations that she has with different characters that what she's really doing is just starting to listen to the little voice in her head, her conscience, if you will. It's always been there, but she just was never in tune with it. She was just always ignoring it. And it really seems like it's the relationships that she's building with the other characters that are causing her to reconsider and to listen to her conscience, more than it is the ethical lessons that she's learning from Chidi. I think this can really be seen by contrasting the time that she's spending in the bad place versus the flashback scenes that we see from her life on Earth in season 1 and 2. In every flashback scene, you see her actively running away from forming relationships with the people around her, whereas in the bad place, she's actually becoming friends with and caring about and doing selfless actions for Tahani, Jason, and Chidi. One of my favorite moments in the show comes in season 2 when Eleanor actually starts to become a mentor for Michael on his own sort of ethical journey. It's when they're having that conversation in the backyard where she tells him, yes, it's hard to be a better person, but it's worth it. And this is an example where we see real evidence that she knew all along that the things that she was doing were bad when she was on Earth, but it's the relationships that she's formed with the people in the good place or the bad place that are making her strive to be a better person. She's inspired by Chidi, by Jason, by Tahani, really by Chidi. So let's talk about Michael. He's a demon and the person who is most similar to Eleanor, I think, in the show. Now, unlike Eleanor, Michael doesn't seem to have this innate understanding of ethics, because he's a demon. We can see this, for example, when he has to write people equals good on a chalkboard over and over again during one of Chidi's ethics lessons so that he can drill it into his head. So you would think that Michael would be the one who would benefit most from these ethics lessons. But even in this case, we see that he masters the principles of the ethical teachings that Chidi is giving before he decides to be a good person, right? Like he puts Chidi in that trolley problem torture scenario where he has him run over people, including his friends, again and again, and then tries to make him, take out Eleanor's organs and put them in 5 other bodies. Michael is demonstrating that he understands the ethical dilemmas that Chidi is proposing, but he's still using that information to torture Chidi. Like, he hasn't yet decided that he wants to be a good person. And it's not until he has this conversation with Eleanor where she talks about, listening to your conscience, that we really see him actually want to start to change to be a better person. I think one of the great things about this show is that it demonstrates how being good is sort of a team effort. We see how the different characters are dragged down when they're not together or when they're being influenced by Adam Scott's character's name in the show. Trevor. We see more in season 3 how Trevor, when he joins the group, drags them down, which really goes to show how for these characters, the moral growth is really dependent on, being together and being inspired by each other It's really a team effort. And by showing how this group either succeeds or fails as a team, the show is also, throwing another dig at ethical systems that judge people individually based on, the positive or negative implications of their actions. So what do you think? Are ethics lessons helpful for people's moral growth, or is it more about the relationships that you form? Let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to get more videos kind of like this. And I think I'll try to link to another video that I've done over here, or maybe over here. I don't know how this works.